He stood on the porch just before sunrise, steam lifting from his shoulders, his boots leaving small dark pools on the wood. Snow fell from him in clumps, like he'd walked straight out of my father's field and into my life. He asked for my father by name, and that was when I knew this morning would not pass quietly. I had lived alone in the farmhouse since my father's heart gave out 3 winters earlier, keeping the land the way he left it, untouched, orderly, and full of unspoken memories. The field stretched wide and pale beyond the windows, the kind of place where sound travels and secrets don't stay buried long. Mornings were usually predictable, ruled by habit and silence. But that morning arrived carrying someone else's weight, and the quiet began to shift. The house was still dark when the knock came. Not loud. Not urgent. Just enough to wake me. The kettle hadn't whistled yet, but I could already feel the house listening. The old boards held their breath. The clock above the sink ticked once, then again. Outside, the sky hadn't decided what it wanted to be. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was nothing. Wind. Maybe. A branch. The kind of sound you explain away because it's easier than getting out of bed. Then the knock came again. Same rhythm. Soft. Certain. I pulled on my sweater and crossed the cold floor. The hallway smelled like dust and last night's fire. My father used to say dawn was when the house told the truth, before the world woke up and covered it with noise. I opened the door. He stood there without stepping forward. A man about my father's age. Maybe a little older. His coat was dark and soaked through, heavy with snow that slid off him in slow clumps. Water pooled at his feet, darkening the porch boards, and I noticed how the wet marks behind him stretched away from the house, straight toward the fields. He didn't smile. Didn't apologize. Just stood there, breathing. Steam rose from his shoulders like the cold was leaving him reluctantly. His face was pale and rough, lined by more than weather. His eyes moved past me, into the house, like he was checking to see if something was still where he left it. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice sounded thinner than I expected. The kind of voice you use when you don't want to scare anything away. He didn't answer right away. His hands hung at his sides, red and cracked, fingers twitching once before stilling. I could hear the faint creak of the porch under his weight, the drip of melting snow tapping out a slow, uneven rhythm. Finally, he looked at me. Really looked. And then he said my father's name. He said it quietly. Like it was fragile. Like it might break if he pushed it too hard into the air. I didn't answer him at first. The name sat between us, heavy and familiar, like an object neither of us wanted to pick up. My father had been gone 3 winters now, but hearing his name from a stranger's mouth made him feel suddenly close. Close enough to hear footsteps behind me. "He doesn't live here anymore," I said. The man nodded once. Just once. Not surprised. Maybe relieved. I couldn't tell. "I figured," he said. But I had to be sure. The wind moved through the yard, carrying the smell of snow and old grass. Somewhere far off, something creaked, maybe the fence line, maybe the barn settling. He shifted his weight, and more water spilled from his boots onto the porch. That's when I noticed how his boots were packed with snow along the seams. Not the clean kind you get from a road. This was field snow. Uneven. Dirty at the edges. Like he'd walked a long way without stopping. "You came from out there," I said, nodding past him. He followed my gaze, then nodded. "Yes." Silence pressed in again. The kind that asks questions without words. "My name is Elias," he said, finally. "I knew your father. A long time ago." He said it like an offering. Or maybe an apology. I thought about the men who used to come by the house when I was a kid. Quiet men. Men who stayed standing even when invited to sit. My father never explained them. He just talked about the weather and sent them on their way. "You're early," I said. "I didn't want anyone to see me," he replied. That landed wrong. Too honest. Too practiced. Behind me, the house felt exposed. Like opening the door had let something old back inside. "Why are you here?" I asked. Elias looked past me again, into the dim kitchen, the shadowed hallway. His eyes lingered on the coat rack. On the photograph by the door where my father stood in the field, squinting into the sun. I owed him something, he said. And now I don't know what to do with it. The words didn't come with drama. He didn't wring his hands or raise his voice. He just stood there, letting the cold do its work. I stepped aside without fully deciding to. The movement surprised both of us. Come in, I said. He hesitated, just long enough to matter, then crossed the threshold. His boots left wet prints on the floor, dark and spreading, leading straight into the house. I watched them form, one after another, thinking how my father used to hate messes but never minded footprints. Elias stopped just inside the door. Didn't take his coat off. Didn't move further. I won't stay long, he said. Outside, the sky began to thin, the darkness lifting at the edges. Morning was coming whether we were ready or not. I closed the door behind him. The latch clicked softly, and for the first time since my father died, the house felt like it was holding something it didn't know how to carry. The cold followed him inside. Not all at once. It crept in low, sliding along the floor like it knew the place. When I closed the door, the latch clicked too loud in the quiet kitchen. The air smelled like snow and wool and something older, metal, maybe. His boots touched the linoleum, and I watched the water spread beneath them, darkening the pale floor in slow, uneven shapes. He didn't apologize. Didn't look down. Just stood there. The house made its small morning sounds. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. Somewhere in the walls, something settled. It felt like the house was waking up around us, realizing it had company. You can leave your coat there, I said, pointing to the chair by the door. He nodded but didn't move. His eyes drifted instead, slow and deliberate, across the kitchen. The cabinet with the chipped corner. The calendar still turned to last month. The window over the sink, fogged with cold. He looked at it all like it belonged to him somehow. I turned toward the stove, needing my hands busy. The kettle was already warm from earlier, so I turned it off before it could whistle. The silence felt safer that way. I poured coffee into 2 mugs without asking if he wanted any. He sat at the table like he knew which chair wouldn't wobble. The wood creaked under his weight, the same tired sound it always made. I noticed how he placed his hands flat on the tabletop, fingers spread, like he was steadying himself. I set the mug in front of him. He didn't thank me, just wrapped his hands around it and stared into the steam. I leaned against the counter and waited. For him to speak. For the house to object. For something to explain itself. Outside, the sky was beginning to thin. That soft grey light that comes before morning decides what kind of day it will be. The fields beyond the window were still white and unmarked, except for a faint line where someone had crossed earlier. Him. I didn't mean to track snow in, he said finally. But he didn't stand up. Didn't reach for a towel. He just said it like an observation, not an apology. It'll dry, I said. He nodded again. A habit, maybe. Or a way of agreeing without committing. We sat there like that for a while. The coffee cooled between us. Steam faded. My hands grew cold around my mug. I thought about my father's mornings, how he used to sit at this same table, staring out the window like he was counting something only he could see. The man's eyes moved again. This time to the doorway that led down the hall. He paused there longer than the rest. His jaw tightened just slightly. You kept it the same, he said. I didn't ask how he knew. The answer sat too close to the surface. People don't change much out here, I replied. He smiled then. But not with his eyes. No, he said. They don't. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. The sound landed between us like a punctuation mark. He took a slow breath and finally looked at me. Really looked. His gaze was steady, careful. Like he was measuring his words before they left him. Do you still own all the land behind the house? He asked. The question was simple. Plain. But it didn't belong in the room. It felt misplaced, like asking about the weather during a funeral. Yes, I said. Why? He glanced toward the window again. Toward the fields. Toward the long stretch of white that hadn't been touched since my father stopped walking it. I was just wondering, he said. But his hands tightened around the mug. His knuckles went pale. That land hasn't been farmed in years, I added. My father didn't want anyone out there. I know, he said, too quickly. That stopped me. I set my mug down, the ceramic clinking softly against the counter. The sound felt loud. Accusatory. You know, I repeated. He exhaled through his nose. A tired sound. Like he'd been holding something in for a long time. Your father was a particular man, he said. About that field. The way he said was past tense, but personal. Familiar. I thought of the way my father used to stand at the edge of the property, hands on his hips, staring out like he was guarding something. I'd asked him once what he was looking for. He told me nothing. And everything. What does the field have to do with you? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted the mug, took a careful sip, and set it back down in the exact same spot. Precision where there didn't need to be any. Your father helped me once, he said. Out there. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the cold. The house seemed to lean in, listening. He told me never to come back, the man continued. But he also told me, if I ever did, I should come before sunrise. The light outside grew stronger, creeping across the floor, catching the wet prints his boots had left behind. They led from the door straight into the kitchen, stopping at the table. No exit yet. I followed his gaze back to the window, to the field, to the untouched ground. And for the first time since he walked in, I understood that he hadn't come for coffee. He'd come for the land. The light outside had shifted while we sat there. Not brighter, just thinner. Snow that had looked white before now carried a blue-grey weight, like it was remembering something. The window held the cold back as best it could, but the morning pressed in anyway. Quiet. Patient. The man cleared his throat. Not because he needed to, because he was buying himself time. My name is Elias, he said. He spoke it slowly, like he wasn't sure it still belonged to him. I repeated it in my head, letting it settle. Elias. It didn't ring a bell. My father had known many men whose names never stayed long. Names that passed through the house and left no mark. But Elias stayed. He folded his hands together on the table, then unfolded them again. His fingers shook once before he steadied them against the wood. Your father, he said, and stopped. The pause stretched. The house filled it with small sounds, the tick of the clock, the soft pop of cooling metal from the stove. Outside, something scraped along the fence line, maybe a branch shifting under snow. He saved my life, Elias finished. He didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, on a dark knot in the wood near his thumb. Like that knot held the memory for him. How? I asked. The question slipped out before I could soften it. Elias's mouth tightened. He considered the word. Turned it over. Then shook his head once. I can't say, he replied. Not yet. There was no drama in it. No mystery for the sake of mystery. Just a line he wouldn't cross. I nodded, though I didn't understand. The coffee had gone cold now. I wrapped my hands around the mug anyway, needing the shape of it. My father didn't talk much, I said. Elias almost smiled. Almost. No, he agreed. He didn't. The sky outside brightened another shade. The snow looked flatter now. Less forgiving. Daylight had a way of revealing edges. Elias finally lifted his eyes. And I felt it then, how closely he'd been watching me all along. Not the room. Not the windows. Me. The way my fingers tightened. The way I breathed. The places I looked when his words landed. I realized he wasn't here to tell a story. He was here to see how I'd carry it. You live here alone? He asked. Yes. A lie of omission. The house still carried my father's presence, whether I named it or not. He nodded, filing it away. The way a man does when he's preparing for something. My father died 3 years ago, I said. The words came out flat. Practiced. I'd said them enough times that they no longer wavered. Elias inhaled sharply. Then his shoulders dropped. Not in grief. Not in surprise. In relief. It was small. Anyone else might have missed it. but I'd lived long enough in quiet to recognize the sound of something heavy being set down. "Oh," he said. Just that. The room felt different after that. Thinner. Like a window had cracked somewhere I couldn't see. "I'm sorry," I added, because that's what people say. Even when they're the ones still standing. He shook his head quickly. "No," he said. "I didn't mean." He stopped himself. Closed his mouth. Pressed his lips together like he was sealing something in. The silence stretched again, but it wasn't empty now. It was crowded. What relief could come from knowing someone is gone? I asked. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I just asked it the way you ask the weather why it changed. Elias looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes were tired. Not old, tired. Like he'd been waiting for a door to close so he could finally sit down. "Because it means he can't be hurt for it anymore," he said. "For what?" I asked. He exhaled slowly through his nose. A long breath. Like he was letting years leave him 1 second at a time. "For helping me," he replied. Outside, the wind lifted snow from the field in small, wandering spirals. They disappeared as quickly as they formed. "My father never asked for thanks," I said. "I know," Elias said. "That was part of it." He stood then, abruptly but not aggressively. The chair scraped softly against the floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "I didn't come to disturb you," he said. "I just needed to know." "Know what?" I asked. "That he was at peace," Elias answered. "And that what he did didn't follow him." The words settled slowly. Like snowflakes you don't notice until the ground changes color. Elias picked up his coat but didn't put it on. He hesitated by the door, hand resting against the frame. The wood creaked under his palm, like it remembered him. "I'm glad it was you who opened the door," he said. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what the right answer was. He stepped outside, pulling the cold back in with him. The light had fully arrived now. Morning, clear and honest. Before he left the porch, he turned back once. "He told me," Elias said, "that one day, someone might come asking questions about the field." My breath caught, quiet and sharp. "And he said," Elias continued, "you'd know what to do." Then he walked away, his boots finding the same path back across the snow. I watched until the field swallowed him whole. The house settled again. The silence returned. But it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like waiting. The sky hadn't finished waking up yet. It hovered in that pale in-between, where night loosens its grip but doesn't quite let go. The kind of light that makes everything feel temporary. Elias stood by the door, his coat already back on, one hand resting against the frame like he needed its permission. "There's something I should show you," he said. His voice was low. Careful. Like he didn't want the walls to hear. "Before the day fully breaks." I didn't answer right away. The house felt warmer now, lived in again. Safe. Outside waited cold and questions and ground that hadn't been disturbed in years. But my father had raised me not to turn away from quiet truths. Only loud ones. So I grabbed my boots. The door opened with a soft protest. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of snow and old grass. The porch boards were stiff under my feet, still dark where Elias had stood earlier. He stepped off first. The snow crunched beneath his boots, loud in the morning stillness. Too loud. Every step felt like it was announcing itself to the fields, to the sky, to whatever might still be sleeping beneath the ground. I followed. Our breaths rose in pale clouds, drifting apart before either of us could claim them. The world felt emptied out, no birds yet, no wind strong enough to speak. Just the sound of walking. Elias didn't look back to see if I was coming. He already knew. His footprints led straight ahead, carving a narrow line into the snow. The same line his boots had traced to my door earlier. No hesitation. No wandering. My father's field opened up before us, wide and white and still. It hadn't been worked since he died. Maybe even before that. He'd said it needed rest. Or maybe he did. The snow lay smooth across it, unmarked except for Elias's path and the faint indentations where deer sometimes crossed at night. The fence line stretched along the far edge, weathered and leaning, posts sunk deep into frozen earth. Elias walked like he remembered the way. Not fast. Not slow. Purposeful. Halfway out, he stopped. Just stopped. He turned and looked at me then, really looked, like he was checking to see if I was still steady. "It's there," he said quietly. He nodded toward the fence line. I followed his gaze. At first, I didn't see anything. Just snow. Just fence. Just the shape of land I'd known my whole life. Then I noticed it. A dark shape. Low. Uneven. Half buried near one of the older posts, where the wire sagged and the wood split from too many winters. Snow had gathered over it, but not evenly. Something beneath had disturbed the surface. I swallowed. "What is it?" I asked. Elias didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside. Just one step. Clearing the path. Letting me pass. "I'll stay here," he said. The words landed heavier than they should have. "You don't want to see it?" I asked. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. "I already have," he said. "More than once." That was enough. I walked on alone. Each step felt deliberate now. Like I was crossing a line I hadn't known existed until this moment. The snow sounded different closer to the fence, denser, packed by drifting wind. My father used to say fences weren't meant to keep things out. They were meant to mark where you stopped pretending something wasn't yours. The dark shape grew clearer as I approached. The snow thinned over it, revealing edges that didn't belong to nature. Straight lines. Corners. Wood. I knelt, my knee sinking deep into the snow. Cold soaked through my jeans immediately, sharp and biting. I brushed snow away with my glove, then my bare hand when the glove felt too clumsy. The wood was weathered. Grey. Old. And deliberate. I recognized it then, not the thing itself, but the care behind it. The way it had been placed. The way the earth around it had been smoothed. My father's hands had done this. I felt it in my chest before my mind caught up. Behind me, Elias didn't move. I could feel his presence though, like a held breath. Like a witness who didn't want to interfere. "What is this?" I asked again, softer this time. Elias's voice carried across the field. Thin but steady. "It's what he told me never to touch," he said. "And never to leave." The sky brightened another shade. Blue-gray giving way to pale gold at the edges. Morning was coming fast now, whether we were ready or not. I pressed my palm flat against the wood. It was colder than I expected. Solid. Real. "Why show me now?" I asked. There was a pause. A long one. "Because it isn't mine anymore," Elias replied. And it never really was. I sat back on my heels, breath unsteady. The field stretched around us, quiet and patient, like it had been waiting for this moment. I thought of my father standing here alone, years ago. Choosing this spot. Choosing silence. I looked back at Elias. He hadn't moved an inch. "Come here," I said. He shook his head. "I can't," he replied. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. The realization settled slowly, like snow falling too fine to see but heavy enough to change everything. I turned back to the buried shape. To the place my father had marked and left behind. Whatever waited here, it had been waiting for me. And the day was finally bright enough to see it. The snow looked untouched from a distance. Clean. Even. Like nothing had ever happened here. But when I knelt, the illusion broke. The cold seeped through my jeans right away, sharp enough to pull a breath from my chest. I didn't move. I stayed there, one knee down, the other bent, like I was waiting for permission. The wind brushed past my ears and kept going. Elias stayed where he was, several paces back, his breath rising in small, pale clouds. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I reached out and brushed the snow aside with my glove. The top layer slid away easily. Too easily. Snow that hadn't had time to settle. Beneath it, the ground was darker. Broken. The earth looked wrong. Disturbed in a way the frost shouldn't have allowed. My father always said frozen ground had rules. It resisted. It held on. This hadn't. I pressed my fingers into the soil. It crumbled slightly under my touch, stubborn but not solid. Recent. I swallowed. I brushed more snow away. Slower now. Careful. The edge of something hard appeared beneath my fingers. Straight. Clean. Wood. I pulled my glove off and touched it with my bare hand. The cold bit immediately, but I didn't pull back. The surface was rough, weathered by time, not rot. Treated. Maintained. Deliberate. My chest tightened. My father's hands had always been like that. Careful. Measured. He believed if you were going to do something at all, you did it cleanly. Even when the thing itself was hard to look at. I traced the edge of the wood with my fingertips. The corner was squared. Sanded. Not hurried. Behind me, Elias shifted his weight. Snow crunched softly beneath his boots. He stayed where he was. Did he do this alone? I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Like I didn't want to wake the ground. Yes, Elias said. I didn't ask how he knew. Some answers didn't need explaining. I cleared more snow away, uncovering a larger section now. The wood formed a shape, not just a plank, but a lid. Something meant to be closed. To be kept. The air felt heavier as the realization settled in. I sat back on my heels and looked at it fully. The disturbed earth framed it on all sides, packed down again with care. Someone had knelt here once before me. Someone strong enough to break frozen ground and patient enough to put it back the way he found it. I could picture him doing it. My father, sleeves rolled up, breath fogging the air. Working quietly. Working alone. What is it? I asked. Elias didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint whistle of wind through the fence wire and the distant creak of a post shifting. I don't know exactly, he said finally. I just know he didn't want it found. That landed hard. I stared at the wood, my thoughts slowing, settling around one question I hadn't let myself ask yet. Then why show me? My fingers curled into the snow. The cold burned now, but it kept me anchored. Present. I brushed away the last of the snow from the top. The lid was larger than I expected. Heavy. Whatever lay beneath wasn't small. Or insignificant. My father's voice surfaced in my mind, uninvited. Some things don't belong above ground. I hadn't understood it then. I wasn't sure I did now. Elias cleared his throat behind me. I could hear the strain in it. He said, Elias began, then stopped. I turned slightly, looking back at him over my shoulder. He stood stiffly, hands at his sides, his face pale against the snow. His eyes never left the ground between us. He said if anyone ever stood where you're standing, Elias continued, it should be you. The words settled slowly, carefully, like they'd been waiting for the right moment to land. I looked back at the wood. My father hadn't left many instructions behind. No letters. No final explanations. Just habits. Just silence. And now this. I pressed my palm flat against the lid. The cold traveled straight up my arm, settling somewhere behind my ribs. I didn't pull away. What did he tell you about it? I asked. Elias shook his head. Only that it wasn't meant to disappear, he said. Just to rest. Rest. The word felt strange here. Heavy. The field stretched out around us, wide and quiet, holding its breath. The sky had brightened fully now, the snow reflecting pale light back at us. Anyone looking from a distance would see nothing unusual. Just two figures in a field. But I knew better. I could feel it now, a certainty forming deep and steady. Not panic. Not fear. Responsibility. My father had placed this here knowing one day I might kneel where I was kneeling now. Knowing the ground would give eventually. Knowing the silence wouldn't last forever. I leaned closer to the lid, resting my forehead briefly against the cold wood. The gesture surprised me. It felt instinctive. Like pressing my ear to a door, listening for movement on the other side. Behind me, Elias didn't speak. He didn't come closer. He understood something I was only beginning to. Whatever lay beneath this ground wasn't just something my father had hidden. It was something he had trusted me to find. And as the morning light stretched across the field, warming the snow just enough to soften its edges, I realized the question wasn't what he had buried here. It was why he had waited until now to let it surface. The house felt different when we stepped back inside. Not colder. Smaller. Like the walls had leaned in while we were gone. Snow melted from our coats and boots, tapping softly onto the floor. The sound echoed longer than it should have. The air carried the field with us, damp earth, iron, old cold. I shut the door and rested my palm against it for a moment, grounding myself in the familiar grain of the wood. Elias stood near the table, removing his gloves one finger at a time. His hands were rough, scarred in places. Hands that had worked hard and paid for it. "I didn't mean for you to see it like that," he said. I shrugged off my coat and hung it where my father's used to go. The hook creaked under the weight, like it remembered. "There wasn't another way," I replied. He nodded, accepting it. The kitchen felt dim now, though the sun had risen fully outside. Light filtered in through the window, thin and angled, catching dust in the air. I poured fresh coffee, the sound of it filling the silence where neither of us knew what to say. We sat again. Same chairs. Same distance. But nothing else was the same. Elias wrapped his hands around the mug this time like he needed it. Warmth. Permission. "I owe you an explanation," he said. I didn't rush him. My father had taught me that people spoke more honestly when you let them arrive at the truth on their own. "Years ago," Elias began, "I made a mistake." He stared into the coffee like it might argue with him. "A bad one." The words hung there. Heavy. Unadorned. "I hurt someone," he continued. "Not the way accidents happen. The kind that stays with you." I watched his hands tighten. Then loosen. He didn't look at me. "I panicked," he said. "I ran. And your father found me before anyone else did." That stopped me. "My father didn't look for trouble," I said quietly. "No," Elias agreed. "But trouble found him anyway." He took a breath, steadying himself. "He could have turned me in," Elias said. "He should have. Everyone would have understood." The clock ticked loudly on the wall, marking time like it always had. Like it didn't care what was being confessed beneath it. "But he didn't," Elias continued. "He listened. And then he made a choice." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not shock. Recognition. "The field," Elias said. "It wasn't just land. It was where he hid me. For a while. Where no one came. Where questions stopped." The image rose uninvited, my father standing at the edge of the property, staring out like he was guarding something sacred. Something fragile. "He told me," Elias said, "that silence can be a kind of mercy. But it has a cost." I swallowed. "He helped me disappear," Elias went on. "New work. A place no one would think to look. He burned what needed burning. Buried what needed burying." My eyes flicked, without meaning to, toward the window. Toward the field beyond it. "He made me swear," Elias said. "That I'd never come back. That I'd let the land keep what it was given." "And now you have," I said. "Yes." He finally looked at me then. His eyes were tired. Apologetic. Still searching. "Because the cost caught up with me," he said. "And because your father isn't here to carry it anymore." The room felt tight. Like there wasn't enough air for all the truth settling into it. "My father told me to stay out of that field," I said slowly. "Said some things were better left untouched." Elias nodded. "He was protecting you," he said. "From knowing what kind of man he had to be sometimes." The words hurt more than I expected. I thought of my father's routines. His silences. The way he never spoke badly of anyone but never defended himself either. The way he stood alone more often than not. I had always thought it was grief. Or age. It was weight. "You loved him," I said. Elias's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I respected him," he replied. "And I feared him. In the way you fear someone who chooses responsibility when it would be easier not to." That sounded like my father. I stared down at my hands. They looked smaller than they used to. Younger. Like they didn't belong to someone meant to inherit this kind of truth. Did he regret it? I asked. Elias considered that. No, he said finally. But he carried it. The house creaked softly, settling around us. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a truck passed on the road, reminding me the world hadn't stopped just because mine had shifted. I thought I knew him, I said. You did, Elias replied. Just not all of him. The coffee had gone untouched again. Cold. I stood and carried my mug to the sink, pouring it out. The sound was too loud in the quiet room. Final. When I turned back, Elias was watching me, not with expectation, but with understanding. My father didn't want this life for me, I said. No, Elias agreed. He wanted it to end with him. I looked around the kitchen. The worn table. The chipped cabinets. The quiet corners my father had kept so carefully ordinary. This was what he'd been protecting me from. Not danger. Knowing the cost of mercy. Outside, the field lay still beneath the morning sun, keeping its promise of silence. Inside, the walls listened. And I wondered how long they'd been holding their breath. The house sounded different when we came back inside. Not louder. Closer. Water dripped steadily from the eaves, tapping the metal bucket by the door in a slow, uneven rhythm. The snow was finally giving up, sliding off the roof in soft, tired clumps. Morning had fully arrived, and with it, a kind of exposure neither of us mentioned. Elias hung his coat on the chair without being asked. It sagged under its own weight, darkened by meltwater. I noticed how careful he was with it, how he smoothed the sleeve like it mattered. We stood in the kitchen again, the same 2 mugs on the table, rings of cold coffee marking time. The house felt smaller now. The walls leaned in just enough to notice. Even the ceiling seemed lower. Elias didn't sit right away. I should have come back sooner, he said. His voice carried no defense. Just fact. I waited. Silence had taught me patience. I thought if I stayed gone long enough, he continued, it might stop following me. He sat then, slow and heavy, like the chair had to earn his trust. The wood creaked beneath him, the same familiar sound it always made. The house didn't object. I've been carrying it, Elias said. Everywhere. The word it stayed unnamed. It didn't need one. He folded his hands together, then pulled them apart, rubbing his palms against his thighs. He stared at the space between us, not at me. I moved towns, he said. Changed jobs. Changed my name once. Twice. Outside, water hit the bucket again. Drip. Drip. I married, he added. More than once. He smiled then. But not with his eyes. It never lasted, he said. I didn't know how to stay still. I kept waiting for something to catch up to me. I thought of my father at this same table. The way he used to sit long after dinner was done, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. Staring at nothing. Or maybe everything. What happened? I asked. Elias closed his eyes. When I was younger, he said, I made a mistake. The word mistake felt too small for the way his shoulders curved inward. It hurt people, he went on. People who didn't deserve it. He paused, breath unsteady. Your father gave me a way out, Elias said. Not a clean one. Just a quiet one. The room felt colder then, even with the heat on low. I pulled my sweater tighter without thinking. The field, I said. Yes, Elias replied. The field was never just land. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. It was a promise, he said. That what happened would stop there. I thought of how my father had always kept that land untouched. How he'd told me not to walk it. Not to ask about it. How he'd said some ground needed to be left alone. I didn't understand him, I said quietly. Elias nodded. He understood you, he said. That's why he kept it from you. The words landed slow. Heavy. Outside, the snow slid from the roof in a longer rush, hitting the ground with a soft thud. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a door closing. I tried to live a good life, Elias said. I really did. His hands clenched briefly, then relaxed. But guilt has a way of sitting down beside you, he added. No matter where you go. I saw it then, not just in his face, but in the way he carried himself. The careful posture. The way he watched doors. The way he chose his words like they might break something if mishandled. My father had recognized it. Had known it when he saw it. How did you know it was time to come back? I asked. Elias glanced toward the window. Toward the field, now streaked with dark patches where the snow had melted through. I got tired, he said simply. And I didn't want to die carrying something that wasn't mine to keep. The bucket by the door overflowed, water spilling onto the floor in a slow spread. I grabbed a towel and knelt, pressing it down. The floor was cold beneath my hands. My father used to do the same thing. Quiet fixes. No commentary. As I wiped up the water, memories came uninvited. His sleepless pacing at night. The way he checked the locks twice. The way he'd stand at the window, staring into the dark like he was listening for something. How many nights? I wondered out loud. Elias didn't ask what I meant. More than you think, he said. I sat back on my heels, towel damp in my hands. He never told me, I said. Elias's voice softened. He didn't want you to carry it, he replied. The realization settled slowly, spreading through me like warmth and ache at the same time. My father hadn't been distant. He'd been shielding. All those quiet habits. All those rules. All that silence. It hadn't been emptiness. It had been containment. Outside, the dripping slowed. The snow thinned into patches of earth, dark and exposed. The field was changing shape, revealing itself inch by inch. Elias stood. I won't ask you for anything, he said. I already asked too much of him. He reached for his coat, then stopped. I just needed you to know, he added. What he did mattered. I nodded. Words felt unnecessary. Elias moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. The house creaked softly, like it remembered his weight. Behind him, the field waited. And I realized then that my father hadn't just protected Elias from the world. He'd been protecting me from the weight of knowing. Until now. As the door opened and cold air slipped back inside, I understood that some inheritances aren't given. They're revealed. And once they are, there's no pretending you don't see them. The drip from the eaves had found a rhythm by then. Slow. Steady. Like a clock no one had bothered to hang. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the snow melt into narrow lines that ran down the glass and disappeared. Morning had settled in fully now, pale light spreading across the counters, catching dust I usually pretended wasn't there. The house looked the same. It always did. But it felt altered, like a room after someone leaves a door open too long. Elias sat at the table, his coat folded over the chair beside him. He hadn't taken his eyes off his hands. They rested on the wood, palms down, fingers splayed as if he needed the table to keep him upright. For a while, neither of us spoke. The drip continued. The clock ticked. I thought of my father at this hour. How he used to wake before the light, make coffee he barely drank, sit with his thoughts until the day felt safe enough to enter. I had mistaken that quiet for peace. It wasn't peace. It was vigilance. Elias cleared his throat. The sound was dry, careful. There's more, he said. I didn't turn around. I nodded instead, my reflection faint in the window. Older than I felt. Sharper around the edges. There's a box, he continued. In the field. The one you found. I closed my eyes briefly. Just long enough to steady myself. What about it? I asked. He took a breath that sounded practiced. Like he'd rehearsed this part alone, in places where no one knew his name. It isn't just personal, he said. It's evidence. That word landed differently than the rest. Heavier. Colder. I turned then. Faced him. Evidence of what? I asked. Elias looked up at last. His eyes were clear. Tired, but clear. A man who had lived a long time with one truth and no place to put it. Names, he said. Dates. Decisions people made when they thought no one was watching. The drip from the eaves quickened, water striking metal outside with a hollow sound. It could ruin lives, he added. More than one. I waited for him to say more. He didn't. You opened it? I asked. He shook his head immediately. Too quickly. No, he said. Your father made me promise. He said it wasn't mine to know. The anger rose before I invited it. Not hot. Not reckless. It came sharp and clean, like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. Then why tell me? I asked. Elias's gaze dropped back to his hands. Because he said someday, the choice would belong to you. The words sat between us, unmoving. My father's voice echoed in my memory, steady, unyielding. Some things are heavier once you touch them. I pressed my fingertips into the counter. The laminate was cool, familiar, grounding. He left that for me. I said. All of it. Elias nodded once. He said you'd understand the cost, he replied. And that you'd carry it better than he could. I laughed then. Not loud. Just a breath of disbelief that escaped before I could stop it. He didn't even tell me it existed, I said. That was the point, Elias answered. Outside, a chunk of snow slid free from the roof and hit the ground with a dull thud. The sound made me flinch. I thought of my father's silences. The way he'd change the subject when certain topics came too close. The nights I'd hear him pacing, slow and measured, as if he were counting steps to keep something contained. All that time, he'd been holding this. And now he'd placed it in my hands, whether I wanted it or not. Why not destroy it? I asked. Why not let it disappear with him? Elias's mouth tightened. He considered his answer carefully. Because some truths don't disappear, he said. They just wait. The drip outside slowed again, uneven now. Like it couldn't decide whether to keep going. I walked to the table and sat across from him. The chair creaked, the same way it always had. Like it remembered every conversation that had passed through it. You're asking me to decide what happens to people I don't even know, I said. I'm asking you to decide what happens to the truth, Elias replied. There it was. The difference my father must have believed in. The line he'd drawn and refused to cross alone. Anger pressed against my ribs, not at Elias, not even fully at my father. At the weight of being trusted without consent. He never asked me, I said quietly. Elias met my eyes then. No, he agreed. But he raised you. The room fell still after that. Even the drip paused, as if listening. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, at a faint crack that ran from one corner toward the center. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Never wondered how it got there. My father had lived with this choice folded inside him, day after day. Protected me from it by never letting me see the shape of it. And now he was gone. Leaving me with the decision he couldn't finish. Where are the names from? I asked. Elias hesitated. People who believed the field would keep their secrets, he said. I closed my eyes. The house seemed to breathe around us, slow and steady. Holding. Waiting. I need time, I said. Elias stood without argument. He picked up his coat but didn't put it on. Take all you need, he said. I've waited this long. He moved toward the door, then paused. Whatever you decide, he added, your father believed you'd do it with care. The door closed behind him softly. The latch clicked. I stayed at the table, alone now, listening to the meltwater find its way down. Somewhere out there, beneath the thinning snow, a box waited. And with it, the kind of truth that doesn't ask permission before changing everything. The day had finally arrived without asking us. Light settled into the field the way it always did, slow, unceremonious. The kind of morning that pretends nothing important is happening. Frost still clung to the grass near the fence line. The snow had thinned overnight, leaving the ground mottled and damp, breathing out cold. I stood there holding a shovel that had belonged to my father, the handle worn smooth where his hands used to rest. Elias waited a few steps back. Not watching me. Watching the ground. The shovel felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its weight, but because of where we were standing. I pressed the blade into the earth. It resisted at first. A sharp scrape. a vibration that traveled up my arms and settled into my shoulders. Frozen soil always fought back, my father used to say. It wanted to stay as it was. I pushed again. This time it gave. Just a little. The sound echoed across the field, metal biting dirt, steady and patient. Elias shifted behind me, snow crunching softly under his boots. He didn't say anything. He didn't offer to help. That felt right. I worked slowly, breaking the ground inch by inch. Each movement deliberate, careful not to damage whatever lay beneath. The earth smelled dark and old as it opened up, a smell I remembered from childhood summers and quiet evenings when my father worked late. The box revealed itself gradually. First a corner, then a side. The wood was damp but intact, edges still squared. Whoever placed it here hadn't rushed. "Stop," Elias said quietly. I did. We both stood there, breathing in the cold air, staring at what my father had left behind. "It should come up now," Elias added. He said not to force it. I slid the shovel beneath the edge and lifted gently. The box loosened with a dull sound, soft, final, like a door closing somewhere underground. It was heavier than it looked. I braced myself and pulled it free, setting it carefully on the snow beside the hole. The lid faced upward, streaked with dirt and meltwater. For a moment, neither of us moved. Elias took a step back. Then another. His hands trembled at his sides, fingers flexing like he didn't trust them. He looked away, toward the far end of the field, where the fence leaned and the trees waited. "I can't," he said. I nodded. I understood without asking what he meant. I knelt beside the box. My knees sank into the cold ground, soaking through my jeans. The chill barely registered. All I could see was the lid. My father's handwriting was there, carved faintly into the wood. Not words, just a mark. A habit. Something he did when he wanted to be sure. I rested my palm on it. For a moment, I thought of all the times he'd told me not to worry. All the nights he paced the house when he thought I was asleep. The quiet way he carried himself, like he was holding something fragile inside. I lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly, as if they'd been waiting. Inside, papers lay neatly wrapped in oilcloth, edges yellowed but clean. Bundled carefully. Protected. My breath caught. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father's. Steady. Unwavering. The same hand that signed school forms, fixed broken tools, wrote grocery lists without wasting space. Names. Dates. Notes written in the margins. I didn't read them. Not yet. The weight of them was enough. Behind me, Elias exhaled. A long, uneven breath. Relief and fear tangled together. "He never opened it," Elias said. "He made me promise." I didn't look back. Promise what? I asked. That if the time came, it wouldn't be my choice. The words settled slowly, like dust after something heavy lands. I lifted one bundle, feeling its heft. Paper shouldn't feel that heavy. But this did. "What happens if this is seen?" I asked. Elias didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. "Lives change," he said. "Not all of them for the better." I closed the lid halfway. Not fully. Just enough to breathe. The field stretched out around us, bathed now in full daylight. Birds had begun to move along the fence line. The world was waking up, indifferent. I felt anger rise then. Not hot. Not loud. Sharp. Controlled. My father had always protected me from hard decisions. From sharp edges. From the things that don't heal cleanly. And now this. Why would he leave this for me? I asked. Elias didn't turn around. "Because you were the only one he trusted to live with the answer," he said. The words hurt more than I expected. I stared down at the box, at the life my father had sealed away with care and intention. I thought of how he'd looked at me sometimes, like he wanted to say something and didn't know how. I wrapped the papers back in their cloth. Folded them the way he would have. Slowly. Respectfully. The box remained open. Waiting. I stood, brushing dirt from my hands. My fingers shook now, just slightly. Enough to notice. The hole in the ground yawned beside us, dark and ready. I looked at Elias. Then at the field. Then back at the box. Whatever truth lived here had waited long enough. The question wasn't whether it should be uncovered. It was whether I was ready to carry it once I did. The box sat heavy between us. Not heavy in size, but in promise. Its wood had soaked up the earth, cold and damp, and smelled faintly of soil and frost. Elias stepped back, letting me handle it. His hands trembled slightly, the way someone's hands do when they've carried a weight too long to put down. He didn't look at the papers yet. Just at the field. Wide, empty, quiet, holding the morning in its slow, patient way. I rested the lid against my knees. The first sheet of paper slid free, crisp against my fingers, edges curled with age. My father's handwriting filled it, precise, unhurried. Each looped letter carried him with it, careful, deliberate, familiar. I didn't read aloud. I couldn't. Not yet. The wind moved across the field, soft but insistent, erasing our tracks even as we stood there. Snow lifted from the ground in thin spirals and vanished before it could settle. The silence pressed against us, patient, expectant. I allowed my eyes to skim. Names, dates, decisions. Things that could unravel lives if exposed. A sharp tangle of responsibility and regret. Elias didn't speak. He waited, breath rising in soft clouds, shoulders heavy. The future of someone I barely knew, or thought I knew, rested on my next move. I felt the weight of it. Not just the wood or the paper, but the choice. My father had set it here, quiet and deliberate. Waiting. I thought of him, years ago, moving through the house like a shadow, tidying, organizing, never explaining. He believed in the power of small acts done properly. He didn't shout justice or rage at wrongs. He hid them, contained them, trusted that silence could carry more than any argument. I folded the first sheet back into the stack. The papers rustled softly, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. My hand lingered over them. Could I do what he had done? Could I hold the line, carry the truth without letting it spill? Elias shifted slightly, the sound of his movement barely breaking the quiet. His eyes never left the field. I don't know if I should, I whispered. My voice felt foolish in the wind. He shook his head slowly. Not to disagree. Not to answer. Just to remind me that the choice was mine. I thought about the lives written on these pages. About the small decisions, the hidden mistakes, the mercy my father had granted without asking anyone's permission. Keeping something buried wasn't cowardice. It wasn't fear. Sometimes it was kindness. The air was sharper now. A gust of wind pushed snow into the hollow of my coat. The papers rattled. I pressed them flat with one hand, feeling their permanence, their authority. My fingers traced the ink faintly, absorbing its weight. I imagined the faces behind the names. I imagined what would happen if someone else saw what my father had hidden. Chaos. Guilt. Shame. Broken trust. And then I understood. This was not just a secret. It was a burden. One my father had carried alone. One he had passed to me, quietly, because he believed I could. I closed the box slowly, lid pressing down against the wood with a dull, final sound. Snow clung to the edges, damp and unrelenting. I looked at Elias. He nodded once. Small. Almost imperceptible. Relief. Trust. Both mingled in his quiet stance. The field stretched out beyond us. Tracks were fading already, flattened by the wind. Our presence here would be erased soon, leaving nothing but the memory of what we had chosen to leave buried. I inhaled, sharp and cold. The wind carried it away almost instantly. I thought about my father again. How many nights had he lain awake, considering what to hide, what to reveal, what to protect? How many burdens had he taken into himself, alone, so I would never have to? And yet, here I was, holding the same responsibility, in the same field, at the same quiet hour. Elias's breath rose and fell beside me. He didn't reach for the papers. Didn't ask questions he already knew he couldn't answer. He just waited. Patient. I pressed the box into the snow once more. My hands lingered on the cold wood. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the field, the wind, and the snow fill the space around me. Keeping it buried might be mercy. It might be courage. Or it might be all that separates peace from ruin. I looked up at Elias. He didn't smile. Not with his eyes. But there was understanding there. Quiet, steady, patient. And I realized then that the choice, heavy, precise, unavoidable, was mine to make. I let the box sit in the field. Cold, silent, and waiting. The wind lifted once more, erasing the last of our footprints. The papers stayed hidden. For now. And I felt the weight of silence settle over me, long and unbroken. Tomorrow would come. Choices would remain. And the field would remember nothing except the quiet we left behind. The snow had softened in the daylight. Not melted, not gone, just gentler. It clung to the fence posts in delicate ridges and pooled around the old tree stumps, untouched in appearance but not in memory. I knelt beside the box one last time, hands hovering over the weathered wood. The morning wind whispered through the field, carrying nothing but itself. I pressed the papers back inside, careful, one by one, folding them just enough to fit neatly. My father's handwriting glinted faintly in the early sun, familiar as a shadow I'd grown up beside but never fully understood. I lowered the lid slowly, pressing it flush against the earth, listening to the faint crunch as the soil resisted its closure. Elias remained at the edge of the field. He didn't move forward, didn't urge me or ask for guidance. He simply watched, shoulders squared, hands tucked into his coat pockets. Relief radiated from him in the subtle set of his jaw, the quiet exhale that didn't break the stillness but seemed to settle it. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I understood him without language. The final push of snow onto the box was deliberate. Deeper this time. Like the earth itself was taking it back, swallowing it again. I stepped back slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. The field held its breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. I felt it then. A weight lifted, or maybe shifted. Not my own entirely. Something older, broader. My father's careful hands had left instructions, and I had followed them. Not perfectly. Not fully certain. But enough. That was the way he had wanted it. Quiet. Precise. Responsible. Elias nodded once, faintly, like a promise more than a greeting. Then he turned. His boots left shallow imprints in the snow as he walked back along the path we'd made earlier. Each step carried a measured patience, as if leaving too quickly would undo the work we'd done here together. I stayed where I was, watching until the field swallowed him whole, the snow already beginning to erase our traces. The house waited for me when I returned. It didn't sigh, didn't creak more than usual, but it felt different. Still. Settled. Something that had been tense and taut now hung quiet, like a held note finally allowed to fade. I took off my coat, brushing snow from my sleeves, and let the warmth creep slowly back into my fingers. I moved from room to room slowly. The furniture hadn't changed. The light still fell the same across the wooden floors. Yet, everything felt altered. Not in shape or shadow, but in weight. A story had passed through me, through the field, and into something permanent. And I had left it where it belonged. I paused by the window overlooking the land. The snow reflected the growing light, pale gold and soft. Tracks from the morning's work were fading fast. The field looked untouched once more, serene as if nothing had been disturbed, yet I knew otherwise. I knew what rested beneath it, waiting quietly, and that knowledge pressed against my chest gently, insistently. My thoughts wandered to my father, to the quiet responsibility he carried without complaint. He had taken burdens so that I might remain free from them, or at least unaware of them. And still, he had left this for me to choose, to understand the weight of secrets, to bear them, to decide if they should see the light. I sipped the coffee I hadn't finished hours ago, warm against my palms. The taste was bitter, grounding. I let it linger. The kettle hadn't whistled again, but I felt the house listening, aware of the decision made in the field, the papers resting beneath snow and earth. A crow passed overhead, black against the pale sky. Its shadow swept across the yard and vanished. I watched it go, thinking how small the motion seemed against the expanse of what remained hidden. How many stories, like this one, wait beneath our feet, waiting for someone patient enough to choose whether to uncover them or to leave them buried. Elias's absence was noticeable now, the quiet he left behind heavier than the snow itself. Relief lingered in the air, faint and tangible. I felt it, held it, carried it with me into the rooms, the hallways, the spaces my father had once inhabited. The house breathed differently now, but it didn't speak. Its silence was the kind that taught you something if you listened. I stepped outside again as the sun crept higher. Shadows retreated slowly across the field, and the light spread evenly over the land. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't triumphant in any way. Just light, soft, and patient, touching the snow and the box beneath it, touching everything I'd held today and choosing to leave it there. I stood alone, shoulders easing, hands tucked into my pockets. The field stretched before me, a quiet expanse holding centuries of unspoken stories. I imagined other hands, other people, kneeling, pressing their palms to the earth. Wondering. Deciding. Choosing silence or revelation. And I understood then that this was how we pass through life. How we live with what we cannot fix and what we cannot undo. How we hold stories beneath the snow, waiting, until the right person comes along, or doesn't. I breathed in the cold air once more. A final exhale. The house behind me waited. The field before me waited. And the quiet settled, heavy, gentle, unbroken. Some stories, I realized, are meant to rest. Until someone decides whether to listen.